Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the I Will Aim podcast. Our topic for today is Shot, story of life, loss, and the urgency of change. What if every letter of the alphabet told the story of life loss, resilience? Today, I sit down with acclaimed author Jude Berman to explore the powerful new book, Shot, a dictionary of the lost, a collection of short stories that confront the gun violence crisis head on, from everyday struggle to unexpected revelation. This story reminds us that every life is precious. Stay tuned as we dive into the intersect of fiction, activism, and the fight for change. Welcome, Jude. How are you doing today?
Good to be here.
How about let's kick it off with a quick introduction?
I have a background actually in education and research, and many years then working as an editor, primarily in those fields. And then at some point, I realized I have also my own writing. And just in the last few years, I've been able to devote some time to that, and I've actually published 3, going on 4 books. And the one we're talking about today, Shot, is the most recent one that just came out this summer.
And I want to highlight that Shot won an award in the Living Now contest. So congratulations. Let's talk about Shot. Shot's such a unique concept using short story. What inspired you to write it that way?
Yeah, partly I was aware of its uniqueness when the idea came to me, because if you look, and Google books and literature and whatnot about gun violence, it's all nonfiction. There are books about the Second Amendment, there are books about laws, there are plenty of memoirs. And I realized that this was different. And the idea, I can't almost take credit for me. It just sort of came to me. It's one of these things that just sort of arrives in the mind full blown. At one point, after having witnessed, as we all have, one after another, mass shootings in this country. And it was just, I guess, my psyche's response saying, this is another way to speak about this.
Your book covers a wide spectrum of character. How did you come up with the character? And how do you form the voice for those characters as you reveal them in an everyday life?
Yeah. So again, they came to me. It was an interesting experience because I would hear these stories. I'd be taking a walk in the neighborhood and I would hear the first one was Anna. That's sort of how it started to be, a dictionary with the letter A. And she told me this story of what was happening to her before she was shot. And when I first heard the story, I actually thought, probably this is something that I read about somewhere that's repeating itself in my mind. And then when there was another one, and I couldn't trace it anywhere, I started to realize that these were stories that were coming to me that were not actual events that had happened that I'd read about or anybody'd read about on the news. And that was important to me, that I wasn't just sort of taking advantage of or using somebody's experience. So I mentally collected these stories, and it readily became, or at some point became clear that there were a whole alphabet of them. And so I just sort of, you could say, downloaded these stories in my imagination and listened to what they were.
What's such a unique approach in writing a story. The book is a blend of like social impact and also an activism fiction. How do you find the balance of using that as a tool for activism and helping people understand the reality of what's going on?
Yeah, so that's a really important point you're bringing up, because people use fiction to escape most of the time. If they want a beach read, or they want to, enjoy some, horrible murder that's going to bring them, excuse me, bring them pleasure to read about it, or they'll figure out what the detective story is. Honestly, I fight against that all the time, in the sense that people look at a book and they're like, oh, well, that sounds good, Shot, that sounds like it's really interesting to me, but, this is what I want to read, and it's not that. So the challenge has been to say, to well, to challenge that, to say, no, we don't have to use our books and other writing just to escape. It's fine to escape when we need to, but we can actually use writing and fiction in particular to do work and advance a cause of social justice. There's, the term activist fiction doesn't really exist if you go looking, for it. I feel like it's something, some of us have coined that term. Social justice fiction, you do see that a little bit now, but I feel like it's something that we can grow as writers by being aware of it. And the award that you mentioned, the Living Now, I mean, one of the reasons that I particularly appreciated that award is because they look for books that have that. But again, most of their books, I was fortunate to win in the general fiction category. And that's just testament to the fact that most of the books actually are nonfiction. And I think fiction gives us, it's like it's another road into the topic or the problem at hand that we don't necessarily think we have.
I think the what you wrote on your book, if there's one takeaway for a reader or listener today, what's that one takeaway you want them to remember from your book?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the 26 letters of the alphabet are 26 stories, and they take place in, well, 26 different states of this country because this is an American issue. And the characters range in age from a 4-year-old to an 80-year-old, which is about as wide as you can get. And then there's every, racial and ethnic, not every, but, a wide range of racial, ethnic, gender related categories. So it's a diverse book and it covers all ranges of people. And so the purpose of that is to convey the message that you were asking, what is it? It's really, this could happen to you. There's, people tend to think, well, you know, gun violence is going to happen to somebody else, it's going to happen in another community. And it's kind of crazy because even though that's said every time, over and over for years and years, you pay attention to the latest event and you see that people are saying, well, I never thought it would happen here. So that's really what I was addressing. And that's what, I think that I would want people to take away as that message.
I think that's a powerful message to say, to not just think it could happen elsewhere, but it could happen to you. And I
Mhm.
think for that, it's a conversation that's really important to have and information important to discuss with other people because the awareness and taking action is extremely important. As you write this book, violence is a very emotionally charged topic. How do you manage this heavy emotional charge as you write it and be able to get your message across?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I first had the idea, as I was saying, these, characters were coming to me, and I was hearing these stories, and I saw that the common denominator in them, what that was. I actually thought I couldn't write the book. And I said to some, people I was in my circles who I was, talking to about it, that, I have this idea, but, I don't think I can do it. Um, and the reason that I was feeling that was sort of what you just said, which is it seemed like it would be too heavy. Like, who on earth would want to read this book about gun violence? Or even knowing that people in it are shot and it's called Shot, because I knew early on that that was the title. I thought I can't do it because people wouldn't want to read it. And it would be too heavy for me to write. But somewhere along the way, it persisted, the idea persisted, and I sort of committed to giving it a try. And as soon as I did, I realized something actually quite profound, which was even though I won't say all, but most of the people are shot in the stories. What I was really writing about was their life.
Mm.
As you said, life is precious. And so the stories they're not about this. The violence is there, but it's not about violence. I mean, if you talk about the average TV drama, there's violence often for the sake of violence there. And here, there actually isn't that. There is violence, yes. The trigger warning is there, but the whole scope of the stories is the life of the people and what it's like. I mean, you don't know for the most part if you're going to be shot. You don't necessarily, or for the most part, you don't know that that's going to happen. And so it's that's what shifted for me, seeing that, well, yes, this is a quote unquote heavy message and a
Yeah.
heavy book, but it's not a heavy read.
Six stories, 20 different life that you mentioned. Is there one story that really stayed with you even after you wrote it?
Well, they all did. You
Oh, they
know,
all. Not
really,
one
they all did.
special one?
Well, that's a little bit like if you ask, a mother, or, which of your child do you like the best? And people ask me that also about, because now I have the three and four coming, fourth book coming, which of your books do you like best? And you can't answer, I don't think you can answer that question because each one has its own value and its own merit. But to the extent that that is a legitimate question in the context of 26 stories, I would say, and this is a little bit of a provocative thing, I would say the last story is my favorite. But part of that, and I'm not going to say why, except that I'm noticing that people don't necessarily read books to the end these days, and they may say, oh, 26 stories, and I'll read the first 10 or something. And so they miss what's happening in that last story, which actually is, how do I say it without giving it away completely? But it's the message of the book is really conveyed most strongly. The activist fiction aspect is most strongly there in that last story. And when I was writing the stories, I didn't actually. It wasn't a case where I knew right off the bat, oh, there are 26 stories and the 26th one says this. As I was going into it and writing, and somewhere in the middle there, I was thinking, okay, well, we need the 26 has got to be special in some way. It's got to be, it can't just be another story like the other stories. And so I think that's why that story, is the one that stays with me the most. And there is a bit of a bittersweetness to that in the sense that I'm seeing that plenty of people who have read the book have somehow not allowed themselves to read them and get to the end. And I don't think that it was necessarily, because there's this thing about I didn't finish reading a book. I don't think it's necessarily that because people are not saying to me, oh, I don't think I've heard anybody say, I couldn't finish that book. It's more just how we live and how we read these days. And even though it's a relatively short book, I think sort of up against that phenomenon of people, being a little, how should we say it, skimming along as they read.
I would say to the audience who's actually listening to this episode, read the book till the end because you'll learn the most in the end of the book. As one of the things I thought that's why I want to interview you for this podcast is I the way I look at this book, it should spark conversation. What's the thing that you want people to walk away with when they read the book? What action do you want them to do?
I mean, I think it's a thing of taking off the blinders.
Yeah.
We have become immune to the violence that occurs in our country, and even as it accelerates, we become, you could say, almost more immune because people just don't have to deal with it. So I think, and this is also true of my other, I've written other books that I would consider social social justice or activist fiction. And that's a large part of what I want to say to the readers is take off your blinders. And that's part of the reason I think that fiction attracts me, because I feel like if somebody's got their blinders on and doesn't want to think about stuff that's unpleasant, nonfiction is not going to be appealing. And so that's what I mentioned earlier about using fiction as kind of a route in to 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 make it easier, I guess you could say, to make it more palatable, to introduce some aspect of, I don't know, I want to call it fun isn't the right word, but the pleasure, you could say, of good writing, because all of the art of it, using that to then say, okay, it's easier to drop the blinders that whoever has on. And the other thing I would say that's coming to mind when you're asking that is young people. I'm not a young person, but a lot of the majority of the stories in the book are on the younger end. As I said, as young as 4, but more school age. And so I feel like people, it was in a way my way of listening to young people in this form and through fiction. But I also think that people would do well to come away and think, and especially in relation to gun violence, that listening to young people on that is important.
I love the concept of removing the blinders, right? And opening your eyes to the reality of what's going on. That's a power. I was trying to imagine like removing the blinders, like and opening this the world in a different light. So thank you for sharing your gift to this world. If anyone wants to reach out to you to ask you more questions, invite you to speak at the event, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Probably on my website, judeberman.com. I don't know if you can attach that to this.
Yep, I will. Once I publish it, it's going to be in the description. I'll add all the link that you added
Yeah.
here that I'll put it on this.
Yeah, and
But
social media, also just the general social media, finding people, people finding me through that is working well too.
thank you, Jude, for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being a guest on my podcast.
Thank you.